Spider-Man 2 is not a flawless movie, but it's still pretty great.
Well, would you say that this is a flaw in the movie?
No, the movie is perfect.
It's not perfect.
It is perfect.
Why is it perfect?
Goodbye.
This video aims to challenge criticisms my friend Southpaw has made, and to see if this video can convince people to appreciate the writing of Spider-Man 2 some more, as odd as that may sound out of context. This should go without saying, but we are dealing with a very popular movie here with a fairly aggressive fanbase, but do not harass Southpaw over this movie. At the end of the day, it's just a movie discussion that's meant for us to think more critically about the writing. I also want to add relevant context here. Southpaw doesn't stand by all of this video. In retrospect, he believes the movie is better than he originally gave credit for, though he still thinks this movie has heavily flawed writing, largely because of the plot. With that said, let's proceed with the video. Now, the opening section in his video discusses the character of MJ, whether or not she is consistent as a character, and how the movie frames her actions. I think this is his strongest point and is on the right track of dissecting the main flaws of this movie, but it's held back by how it targets some of the wrong things.
The first one-on-one exchange that Peter has with MJ shows her being very flirtatious with him, only for her to then tell him,
I'm seeing somebody now.
You mean like a boyfriend?
Well, like, I like him. What?
Nothing. That's good, you know? Companionship.
Maybe more than that.
More?
I don't know.
it seems as though she's attempting to make him jealous, which winds up working because he promises to make it to her play the next night. Of course, this ends up not working out due to him having to intervene in a crime taking place on the way to the play, and when he later tries to apologize to her multiple times for being unable to make it, she just acts dismissively towards him and decides to get engaged with the guy that she mentioned seeing earlier, who turns out to be J. Jonah Jameson's son, John. So either she's telling the truth, and John isn't her boyfriend yet, and he's just a guy that she's seeing and thinks she likes, making her rushed engagement to him an obvious ploy to make Peter jealous, or she's downplaying how long she's been seeing John as a means of letting Peter think that she still might be available so he can pursue her and she can leave John. Either of those interpretations makes MJ a manipulative person.
I think the most reasonable assumption here is that MJ was telling the truth about John not being officially her boyfriend yet, but she leans towards that idea after Peter makes it clear that he's unreliable. It's never stated or hinted in the film that MJ accepted John's proposal to make Peter jealous. The more likely reason is that MJ had sincere feelings for John at the time and believed that he would always be there for her, which is something she values as someone with trust and abandonment issues. I don't think it's manipulative for her to let Peter know that she's seeing someone. If anything, it shows more transparency. Peter shows signs that he is still interested in MJ, and when MJ tries to get him to open up, he mysteriously backpedals. In her eyes, it's really Peter that's being dishonest here, so she's using the truth to tell Peter that his window is closing, and she's going to move on if he remains non-committal. So I don't think this is a good example of MJ being manipulative. This is rather open and honest, and it's said to stop Peter from being dishonest to her.
And she only gets worse from here. MJ was present when Harry and Peter had this exchange.
Where you been, pal? You don't return my calls.
I've been busy.
Peter is too busy to even keep up with his best friend, which anyone who doesn't know about his double life would just figure to be a natural effect of being a low-income college student with a job. Possibly even two.
But Peter doesn't have classes that day, given that the play is on a Saturday as seen on the ticket itself. The college excuse wouldn't really make sense. Peter's jobs wouldn't work as an excuse either. For Joe's Pizza, he would get his work hours ahead of time, and freelancing at the Daily Bugle allows Peter to choose his own hours, and Peter told MJ the day before that he would show up to her play, which means his work schedule that night would be clear. So why would her default assumption be that he was busy at work? If anything, if Peter were to give either of those explanations, it would be immediately obvious to MJ that Peter is lying, and it would be out of character if she didn't call him on that. But this brings me to my larger issue with this criticism. Peter doesn't actually say either of those things, so in MJ's eyes, Peter was not busy with school, Peter was not working during the hours of the play, and he couldn't show up on a Saturday night where his schedule would be most open. So, what happened? Did he lie about being available for the play? Did he lie about intending to come to the play? Now, if this were the first time something like this would happen, I would understand criticizing MJ's dismissiveness because there's no pattern of behavior to assume Peter was being careless or flaky. The problem is that Peter has a pattern of behavior where he is flaky and even dishonest at times. There's a reason she's surprised that Peter will even show up to the play and tells him not to disappoint her.
I'm gonna come see your play tomorrow night.
You're coming?
I'll be there.
Don't disappoint me.
I won't.
This directly implies that Peter is constantly flaky, so the more times you disappear for mysterious reasons, the less coincidental or unlucky this will appear to people. If anything, mentioning that Peter behaves this way around Harry just makes it worse for Peter, because this only adds to the pattern of behavior that MJ notices.
He lives in another reality. Don't you, Pete?
Oh, well, maybe she just doesn't know what his financial situation is. Bullshit! Literally, the last scene of the movie is her showing up at Peter's apartment without having to be told where it is at any point in the film. So it's safe to infer that she's known about the shitty apartment he's been living in this entire time, which should tell her fucking everything about how strapped he is financially, and in turn, how busy he would probably be just to make ends meet and how little money he has to blow on a ticket to a play.
Knowing where someone lives is not the same as seeing their entire room. She could know Peter's address and use that information for multiple reasons. Harry could have brought her there so they could meet up with Peter, only for him to be unavailable. She could use it to send holiday cards. Aunt May could trust MJ with Peter's address. Knowing where someone lives doesn't mean you've seen their room or what condition it's in, and I don't think it's fair to assume that MJ knows Peter is struggling with money, since Peter is never open about this, and Aunt May doesn't like talking about her financial issues, not even around Peter, since she didn't want him to see the letter from the bank.
You okay?
Of course.
You're so alone. And I saw the letter from the bank.
Oh my. You did? I'm a little behind. Anyway, I don't want to talk about it anymore.
She should be aware of how busy he is, and he hasn't been able to make any commitments because of that, and it just so happened that something came up the one time he did. But you would think that she would understand that that's just life. Shit happens. Any number of things could have stopped Peter from being able to come.
But the film never implies that this is the first and only time Peter has bailed on people. How many times can Peter flake out and have it be chalked up to, that's life, things just happen? This will eventually not work if this becomes a pattern. This pattern was even present in the first film.
You were late again? I don't get it. Wait, where do you go all the time?
Around.
Another thing to note, this was when Peter's place was being covered by Norman, and Harry was his roommate. So the cost of living was far less of a responsibility to Peter. I imagine Norman had that all covered. So even before Peter had his own apartment, he was often flaky and non-committal to his friends.
So you were always like this?
But there's this idealized version of him that she's made up in her head that will always be able to make it when he makes a plan with her. And when the real Peter isn't able to live up to that unrealistic fantasy, she lashes out at him, despite knowing how full his plate is.
So I've talked about why the college and job excuses wouldn't hold up, but I think this is a good opportunity to highlight another point that MJ makes. Yes, Peter is busy in life and has responsibilities to fulfill, but so do many other people in MJ's life who went out of their way to make the time for her show. Something that many people learn growing up is the importance of making time for those you care about, and MJ deliberately compares Peter to other people who also have things going on in their lives.
John has seen my show 5 times. Harry has seen it twice. Aunt May has seen it.
John is an astronaut, and it's apparently said that astronauts generally have very busy workdays. When they're in space, the average workday is 16 hours, and the crews work overtime for these missions. John has to balance his responsibility as an astronaut and make time for his friends and family. John succeeds at this well enough that he can make it to 5 shows. What this demonstrates on the surface is that he cares more to put forth the effort to support MJ. Harry has major responsibilities as well.
How are things going at Oscorp?
Oh, they're great. I'm head of special projects. We're about to make a breakthrough in fusion.
Being an owner of a corporation takes lots of responsibility and time away from him, yet he was able to make it to 2 of MJ's shows. Aunt May, who is also struggling financially, but in fairness, MJ doesn't know that, has also put forth the effort to see MJ's show when she's busy with work as well. But what stings MJ more is even her sick mother and abusive father put forth the effort to see her show.
My sick mother got out of bed to see it. Even my father, but my best friend, who cares so much about me, can't make an 8 o'clock curtain. He's nothing to me but an empty seat.
MJ makes multiple points in this exchange. Like I said earlier, you make the time for the people who matter in your life. On top of this, actions speak louder than words. Peter's actions don't reflect him claiming to care so much about her, because it appears as if he's missing her show without reason. And again, this on top of the fact that Peter has a pattern of being flaky is going to paint a picture of him not caring.
But I will always be there for you. I will always be there to take care of you.
Goodbye.
MJ feels like she's being played with. First, Peter goes on about the great thing about MJ, which makes him seem interested in her. Then he allows her to kiss him at the funeral and even goes along with it, only to say that they're just friends right after. Then he makes it seem like he's interested in her again.
I saw your billboard on Bleecker. It's nice. I get to see you every day now.
I liked seeing you tonight, Peter.
Oh boy, yeah.
And when questioned on this, he immediately backs down in a very obviously dishonest way.
Oh boy, yeah. What?
Nothing.
Do you want to say something?
I was wondering if you're still in the village.
You're such a mystery.
Notice how he changes his answer in the middle of it, like he was going to say one thing, but then shifted to another. She can clearly tell that he's lying one way or another. Then Peter acts like he's let down when MJ says she's seeing someone, then says it's great that she is, then says he'll show up at her play, and as she predicts based on a pattern of Peter's flaky behavior, he doesn't show up to the play. So all she's left to assume is that Peter is playing with her emotions for some odd reason, and she's getting tired of it.
I don't know you, and I can't keep thinking about you. It's too painful.
To make matters worse, Peter would have had a totally valid excuse for not being able to make it to her play. A car literally wrecked his bike on the way there. Even leaving out the fact that he had to intervene in a crime, Peter would have had a very easy to prove excuse for not being able to make it. But he just doesn't, for no apparent reason.
So how is this MJ's fault if Peter failed to communicate this? Peter mentions the usher being obnoxious, but that would imply that he didn't take her show seriously enough to show up on time for it. It's almost as if he forgot about it and remembered it at the last minute, which doesn't really show her that he cares much to show up. Now, to discuss Peter's side, he wasn't planning to give an excuse to MJ, he was planning to tell her that he's Spider-Man. That night, Peter likely realized that his excuses would run thin, and he would only run into this situation again and again. And even if he could excuse it this time, he's not going to be able to do this every single time, so coming up with an excuse isn't his plan. His plan was to tell MJ the truth, as hard as that may be. We know this because he doesn't immediately make the excuse. His wording and delivery implies that he was building up to telling her the truth, but he backed out at the last second and jumped to a random excuse on the spot.
I really was planning on it all day. I know you predicted I'd disappoint you. It's amazing, isn't it? How complicated a simple thing like being someplace at 8 o'clock can become. Actually, there was this obnoxious usher. Somebody has to talk to that usher, MJ.
Notice how he was dancing around what he was actually going to say to MJ rather than just saying it outright. This tells me that the usher excuse wasn't planned, and he was rather building to a revelation, because when we contrast his hesitant and roundabout wording and delivery with what he says after the call ends, Peter is speaking much faster. He's more coherent and sure of what he's saying.
I want to tell you the truth. Here it is. I'm Spider-Man. Weird, huh? Now you know why I can't be with you.
Now you could argue that he should have brought up the bike accident when backing out, but given that he wasn't planning ahead of time to fabricate his story and is under pressure right now, I think it's reasonable that he didn't initially think to bring up the bike and carefully construct a narrative around it, and rather thought of the main obstacle that kept him from entering, which was the usher. He also got cut off before he could elaborate on what was said to the usher and why he was late to begin with. So if he was going to bring that up to explain why he was late to begin with, he would have been cut off beforehand. In Peter's next interaction with MJ, he does try to explain himself, but MJ cuts him off and makes it clear that she doesn't trust him.
There was a disturbance.
I don't know you, and I can't keep thinking about you. It's too painful.
So if Peter makes another excuse, which he tends to do the other times he would have let people down, it's going to eventually run thin, and given how often Peter has to disappear or bail out, this will not work in the long run.
It's a disturbance, another disturbance. Oh, there's a disturbance with you. Come on.
Peter has ruled out telling MJ that he's Spider-Man, so he's trying to come up with an alternative to show that he cares, so he tries playing a trick that his idol played to win her over.
If you keep something as complicated as love stored up inside, it can make you sick. But if you want to get a woman to fall in love with you, feed her poetry.
Poetry.
Never fails.
But of course, this doesn't work in his favor.
Day by day, he gazed upon her. Day by
Don't
day.
start.
Mary Jane's treatment of Peter becomes even less reasonable when you remember the first movie ending with the implication that she had figured out that he is Spider-Man due to the way that he kisses.
That's not what the ending implied. The ending implied that this felt familiar for her, but she doesn't know why.
If anything, you would think she'd take his lack of availability as just another clue that indicates that he's the webhead after all.
The problem is that Peter is still flaky and dishonest to MJ in person. As Peter Parker, he seemingly plays with MJ's emotions, and being a superhero doesn't justify that behavior. It'd be one thing if Peter was straight and honest, even if he was telling MJ that he doesn't love her, but he constantly plays tricks on MJ's mind on whether he loves her or not. And regardless of your intent, that's a really manipulative and bad way of treating someone. If MJ has an idealized view of someone, I'd say it's Spider-Man. It's more difficult to see someone like him as a heavily flawed person because all she sees is the mask and his heroic actions, not the man behind it. So she would think that Spider-Man is someone too well put together to be someone like Peter Parker, who plays with her emotions and doesn't commit to the people he claims to care about.
Of course, the movie eventually remembers that she did figure out who Peter was in the one scene we see her with her fiancé that we're to believe she only just recently met. She just randomly gets this urge to kiss him similarly to how she once kissed Spider-Man, and in the middle of it she seems to have this epiphany that leads her to arrange a meetup with Peter so she can kiss him again. Because I guess the one from the first film's ending just wasn't enough for her to be certain that it was him who saved her from a gang of would-be rapists. Like, seriously, why has it taken her this long to remember this, and why does it feel like it's just come out of nowhere?
So, there is a criticism to be made here, just not the one that Southpaw made. I don't think the problem here is that MJ remembers this now. She's always remembered it, but there's a very coincidental circumstance here that made her revisit it. Around the same time Spider-Man is quit, Peter Parker completely changes his behavior and tries to tell MJ that he's different. For one, Peter actually shows up to her show this time around, which shows that he's actually putting forth the effort to be there for MJ. He looks much different than before. He actually does his homework now, and he's not dancing around anything. He's explicitly stating to pick up where they left off. Everything about Peter changed the moment Spider-Man quit, so I think now is a reasonable time for her to at least consider a connection. My issue is that MJ tries to figure this out through a kiss. Why exactly? How does that tell you anything concrete? It'd be better if she questioned Peter to try getting him to slip up and reveal hints that he's Spider-Man. Also, it's not a good idea to kiss Peter to decide who she should be with, because if she was wrong and Peter Parker wasn't Spider-Man, then she just cheated on her fiancé for no reason. So I think this plot point here is silly, but not for the reason Southpaw gave. But I do believe he's on the right track here.
To top it all off, after confirming that Peter is the same guy who saved her life on 4 different occasions at this point, she says,
I think I always knew. All this time.
What the hell?
Then why the fuck have you been so hard on him for the first 3/4 of this movie, you asshole?
Saying I think I always knew is not the same as saying I always knew. Why would she phrase it that way if she actually knew the whole time? Why not just say I always knew who you were? Because she didn't actually know. The reason she says this is because she was able to link the kiss to Spider-Man from the beginning. She just didn't know why or how significant this really is. If she's surprised by the reveal, then she didn't know the whole time.
And then on the day of the wedding, she just fucking leaves her fiancé at the altar. Like, it would have been one thing if John was depicted as kind of an asshole that wasn't concerned about her, but literally all the screen time that he gets in this film seems to indicate that he's actually a really good guy who's just ended up being led on by this crazy person. I just love the idea that we're supposed to be okay with this dude getting humiliated at his wedding, simply because it means MJ's running off to be with the main character.
Yeah, this is really strange in presentation. This breaches character because MJ wouldn't leave John to take the heat of the embarrassment. In her eyes, John hasn't done anything to deserve this. The scene would actually work better if she did show up, but said no when asked if she takes John as her husband, and apologized before leaving. I get it was done for the theatrics, but...
Good gosh, there's gotta be a better way to do this.
With that said, let's move on to the main plot discussion.
No, I am not taking issue with the idea of Otto being able to build a machine that can create a miniature sun powered by tritium, which in real life is a gas and in this film is some golden crystallized substance. I am not here to insist that this movie needs to follow every last law of physics to the letter, and I can suspend my disbelief and accept these obvious breaks from the real world in a comic book movie. Likewise, I am not going to raise any issues regarding exactly how heavy Doc Ock's tentacles are. They're already resistant to magnetism and heat, so I imagine they're made up of some fictional comic booky metal that has those properties on top of being light enough for a person to be able to stand upright while wearing them.
That is completely fair. I wanted to include this context to make it clear that Southpaw is not trying to argue for realism, rather he's trying to argue for consistency within the universe. This can be an unfortunate misconception that occurs in discussion, so let's try to be clear on the standard being used here.
So what are my actual criticisms in relation to this plot? Well, first things first, let's just point out the fact that Otto just builds this machine that has the potential of wiping out a city if the slightest thing goes wrong in his apartment in the middle of New York at most 3 years after 9/11 happened. There's apparently debate over whether 9/11 did happen in the Raimiverse, and I think either side can make a strong case, but for the sake of steel-manning the movie, I'll go along with the idea that it didn't. Even if this version of New York never had 9/11 happen, it is still patently absurd that Otto would have gotten the permits that he would have needed to legally conduct an experiment like this in the middle of the city. You cannot just do something like this without first going to the government and telling them about it so they can give you the go-ahead. It would make more sense if this was entirely a secret operation, something happening underground perhaps, away from the public eye. But no, apparently the city of New York saw that a guy was going to start up an artificial sun in his apartment, which could potentially draw anything made out of metal into it and cause a catastrophic amount of damage and loss of life.
Yeah, I agree overall. I think the way to fix this would be to establish a protective barrier, since Otto can just shut down the machine if anything were to go wrong, and the barrier would prevent people from losing any items. I don't really have a problem with this being in the city if the precautions are strong enough to cover for any of those consequences.
What the fuck is Father Lantom doing here? Doesn't he have a blind orphan to raise?
He read the script of Daredevil Born Again and gave up.
Why is Rosie still standing here? Why hasn't she cleared out of the area like everyone else? What is she doing in this exact spot?
She doesn't want to leave her husband behind.
Why does she react to watching a window smash by just screaming without looking away so that the glass doesn't get pulled into her eye? Why isn't she at least trying to protect her face with her arms, which is an instinctual reflex that one would have to consciously resist the urge to do when glass is flying at their face?
The shot was in slow motion, so I assume it was too fast for her to react, and since Otto was further away, he had a bit more time, only enough so that he could block it at the last second.
How does getting glass in her eye instantly kill her anyways?
Do we even know if it instantly killed her? Because what we see is her falling down, and if the glass reached her brain as well, this would potentially kill her. Regardless, blood loss would also occur, especially since it was pieces of glass, not just the one that hit her eye.
He walks out of the hospital and the scene transitions over to him arriving at this area somewhere in the docks, and it's not something that immediately jumps out at you, but the first of many issues relating to the logistics of how this plot can work with this version of Doc Ock shows up here. Right after Otto leaves the hospital and sends a car flying through the air before it could run him over, he hears the sound of sirens approaching and then books it out of the area. Maybe the sirens weren't for him, but did no one in New York try calling the cops on him?
Well, it depends on how long it takes for the cops to get there and which directions Otto went. On average, the response time to emergency calls is 10 minutes, though for school shootings it has been averaged to 18 minutes. Otto could have gone any number of directions, and I doubt anyone would be interested in following him with how dangerous he is.
Or were the cops called on him, but they somehow managed to lose track of the guy that doesn't appear to move at a pace that could outrun a police car or helicopter? You would think they'd already be on their way, because you'd imagine that one or more of the surviving doctors that ran out of the operating room would have called 911, so he doesn't have much of a head start, and he can't exactly blend in. It should pretty much be impossible for the police to lose him, and yet they do.
I'm not sure why it's relevant whether or not Otto can outrun a cop car or helicopter. If it's possible for suspects to escape from their crimes on foot in the real world, then I'm not sure why it's strictly impossible for Otto to do so as well, especially since he can move faster than a normal human and doesn't get tired.
It would be one thing if he moved around through abandoned subway tunnels or the sewers, but we never see him do that in this film, nor do we get any hints of that occurring.
That's because the film doesn't show us Otto's travels in between the starting point and destination. For all we know, Otto did use the subway or sewers to get around in between. It wouldn't be out of character given that he wants to be hidden, so I don't see why we can't infer this.
I remember thinking that this was a pretty cool fight sequence, even though it wasn't quite as cool as the one on the train. So when I rewatched the scene on YouTube, I was kind of flabbergasted at the number of issues I completely missed before. I can honestly say that there's more issues in this bank sequence than there are in the entirety of Into the Spider-Verse.
So this gets into discussion about the fight scenes, and while I agree that they're not absolutely flawless, his reasons aren't fully developed in terms of highlighting how this is inconsistent in universe. And since the comparison was made to Into the Spider-Verse, I'll be making a few comparisons to see if it makes it easier to understand.
The first thing worth mentioning is that Doc Ock has now acquired a trench coat and hat completely out of nowhere. I'm not saying that it's impossible for him to acquire one, but consider what I said earlier about the cops not following him or being called on him as he made his way to the docks. And remember that that same issue probably applied to him leaving the docks to get these articles of clothing in the first place.
Considering that Otto has lost the cops by the time he is at the docks, none of the cops would know where he is to even track him. While it's not much, Otto can still partially hide his arms underneath his sweater that he found. We're shown that his arms didn't poke holes around the back to wear it, so it can still cover his whole body, just not as well as the coat. I imagine what happened is that he snuck into a clothing store at night and obtained the coat and hat, or maybe he stole it off a homeless person or another random civilian. Who knows? I don't think it's impossible or needs to be shown to us, considering we know Otto uses clothes to hide his arms, and that would be in his interest to do. And in fairness to the video, this isn't entirely a criticism. He agrees with this too.
It is better than him not having a disguise at all though, and I wouldn't say we necessarily needed a scene dedicated to him just getting his new clothes. So Ock uses his tentacles to rip the door to the vault right out of the wall. Man, CGI has come a long way since this movie, and already I have a couple of questions. Isn't it unusual for a bank to have its vault in an open area like this where everyone can can see it. I'm not saying it's logically impossible, but isn't that kind of a glaring security issue? Don't most banks keep their vaults somewhere underground or in a back area?
Considering where this was filmed was actually a real bank that did have a vault in this exact location, it seems it is possible. Granted, it was shut down in 1988 and repurposed, it's still a design detail that did exist. I know this is a smaller point, but it got me interested in looking into it anyway.
The second thing that bothers me is that Peter and May are established to be no more than 20 feet away from where Ock's standing, and neither of them react to this for 10 whole seconds until Peter's spider sense finally goes off. I guess both of them are going deaf or they're just that oblivious.
Okay, it's not flawless.
Not as oblivious as the security guard though. Has a gun that works just fine at range, decides to close the distance with someone who is clearly very dangerous at close quarters. This is dumb enough as it is, but wouldn't it suck if two other guards did the exact same thing?
Okay, it's not flawless.
Ock begins throwing bags of coins at him, and Spidey sends one right back at him, hitting him in the chest and knocking him into a wall. Somehow, he's still standing up on his own 2 feet after getting hit in the chest with a bag full of gold coins thrown at him, which should fucking hurt and possibly break a few important bones in his chest, but he just shrugs it off.
Whether that hurts Otto or not shouldn't matter, because it's not his body that's doing the work, it's the arms. I don't know why this should break his bones either. Whether that's true in real life, I'm not sure, but the Raimi movies tend to operate off deliberately unrealistic physics, which makes this a heightened reality, so I would need to see feats within the universe to prove that this would 100% break Otto's bones. This is definitely apparent in Into the Spider-Verse as well, which I imagine we'd understand is operating off its own exaggerated physics as well.
It's something I never really thought about before, but now I can't ignore it. Doc Ock is not a superhuman. As a matter of fact, he's the weakest Raimi villain, not in terms of characterization, but in terms of power level and durability. He has his exoskeleton with 4 artificially intelligent robotic tentacles and nothing else, while Norman and Harry Osborn are enhanced by the Goblin formula, Sandman is made out of sand and can absorb most forms of damage, and Venom is, well... But Ock simply has no in-universe justification for why he's able to take the damage he takes in this movie.
Then the question we have to ask ourselves is how much humans can take in the Raimiverse. To stay within the realm of internal consistency, we have to look at every time Spider-Man fights normal humans. Punching Flash across the hall like this would probably break a few bones, and if not, it would knock the wind out of him if we're being realistic here. But Raimi isn't aiming for realism. He seems to aim for more floaty or bouncy impact physics in order to stylize his action sequences. This is also shown when Green Goblin kicks Spider-Man, and he stays in the air longer than he really should. He would have hit the ground sooner, realistically speaking, since the force of gravity would pull him down at the same rate as if he were simply dropped down. And the same could be said with the hit on Flash. When Peter yanks these two civilians, realistically, you'd expect a larger whiplash than what we see in the film, but that doesn't happen since Raimi is relying on exaggerated and heightened physics. The same can be said for these thugs that Spider-Man webs away, even though Spider-Man has a no-kill rule. Spider-Man backhands 2 of these thugs and they go flying backwards to hit the windows rather than falling on their asses in a realistic manner. We also have a scene where Spider-Man yanks a criminal by the head upwards, then drops him on the building, which, realistically speaking, could cause serious damage or death. Spider-Man grabs this other criminal while swinging, which could cause the whiplash to kill him, realistically speaking. Spider-Man wraps his leg around the guy's neck, then yanks him head first against a wall, which, realistically, would probably kill him.
If he survived that, he is praying for death.
By now, I think the point is clear. When talking about internal consistency, we need to look at the pattern rather than scaling it by real-world standards. And the pattern shows us that this movie is working off heightened physics in terms of how floaty or bouncy, or even elastic, characters are allowed to be in combat compared to the real world. So when Doc Ock takes damage in ways that aren't necessarily realistic, we'd understand that many of his blows fit within the established reality in the Raimiverse. And I do think this is quite comparable to how the Spider-Verse movies handle their physics as well. Peter saves Miles in a way that would realistically make the whiplash kill him, or at least severely harm him. While Miles does have powers, Peter doesn't know that, so this would be out of character for him to do if we neglected the heightened physics. Peter B. Parker webs a scientist by the leg, yanks him upwards, then yanks him against a group of scientists in a manner that would probably kill them realistically. Gwen kicks Olivia in the face in a way that makes her entire body go spinning, then she gets yanked into a massive kick straight to her face. This would realistically take her head off, and if we go with that standard, this would be character assassination for Gwen because she needs Olivia to open the collider to send them all home. There are more examples I could use, but I think this sample should be enough to establish a pattern, similar to how I established a pattern with the Raimi movies. I don't think either creative team went into these action sequences thinking that real humans can survive this, and that we should try this at home. Rather, they took the more exaggerated route for the sake of making the action more stylized and exciting, which I'm fine with as long as the internal consistency remains. So with that said, yes, this can go too far at times. For example, in Spider-Man No Way Home, Doc Ock is able to grab Electro's arc reactor and rip it off of him, ignoring the fact that Electro would shoot Otto if he tried that, but Otto shouldn't be able to grab him at all because Spider-Man 2 established that he is weak to electricity, which means he would be stunned the moment he tries to grab the arc reactor. This is a problem because it breaches internal consistency. Another example is how Doctor Strange, a normal human, can survive a pumpkin bomb straight to the face when this has dealt more damage to Tobey's Peter and Harry while he had the Goblin enhancement. And that same bomb killed Eddie Brock, and the MCU never established that regular humans can survive bombs to the face. In fact, they've shown how consequential that can be in the first Iron Man movie. This is a bit of a longer section, but I wanted to make the distinction between breaching internal consistency and breaching realism.
To clarify, I get that Spider-Man always pulls his punches because he has a moral code against killing, which he's very capable of if he punches with full force, so that's not an issue in and of itself. The issue arises from the plausibility that Ock has the pain tolerance and durability to take as many hits as he does and still get back up. Even when you're fighting someone of average human strength, you can only take so many hits to the face before you go down. A lot of older movies didn't account for this, but that's not an excuse.
Well, that depends. Are these movies relying on realistic physics, or are they deliberately exaggerated by the creators? It's of course a case-by-case basis, but I think in this case, we need to see feats within the Raimiverse rather than statements of how the human body would realistically operate.
You could argue that since the exoskeleton is attached to his spine, that it could make his nervous system more resistant to feeling pain to a certain degree, but pain is just a signal sent to our brain warning us of damage to our body. Damage can still be done to us without us feeling it, and the human body can only take so much damage before it can't function anymore.
Sure, but what's considered too much damage in the real world is going to be different from what's considered too much damage in the Raimiverse.
I guess this gets Spidey's powers to start working again because then he webs two different desks and pulls them towards Ock. Interesting that there's still lots of people inside the bank that haven't evacuated due to the dangerous fight happening in here.
Well, in the footage being shown, there are people trying to escape. Some are too afraid to try escaping because of how unpredictable this fight is, and I think it's fair to say that some would actually be invested in watching their local hero save the day.
Now watch this part here. Look at where Doc Ock is in relation to the window he's about to get thrown out of. That thing is, what, 30 feet away at least? He gets hit by this desk with enough force to send him flying back that entire distance, through that window, then through this large outdoor electrical junction box, which is really hard to knock down by the way, and then into a taxi cab so hard that the driver's side of the damn thing lifts up off the ground for a second. Remember, Doc Ock does not have an established superhuman durability. As far as we're concerned, he shouldn't be able to survive something like this.
Since my recent section set a foundation for how I tackle these points, I'll try to keep these responses brief. This isn't far different from Peter punching Flash across the room, or backhanding these thugs to make them go flying. And Otto at least has protection from his metal harness, and the arms are behind him to take the direct impact, so this seems to slot into the internal consistency of what humans can take in this universe.
The police arrive at the scene and we finally get to see how Doc Ock, a regular person whose only source of armor will be the metal harness over his abdomen, and whatever shielding his tentacles may give him, fares against New York's finest. Doc Ock is very lucky that only the least trigger-happy cops in all of NYPD are here, especially given all the time that passes that one of his tentacles reaches into the crowd while they just stand there and do nothing. Man, all cops in this film really are bastards.
Mosquito, is that you? Nah, jokes aside, I don't think this is a problem because there are other civilians in the background while Otto is doing this. So shooting at Otto has a great risk of hitting civilians. In fact, the presence of a civilian is enough to deter the cops from shooting. They were just issuing threats to deter Otto from proceeding elsewhere, rather than actually having plans of shooting him.
Cut back to outside, Spidey lands on the building right in front of Ock and tells him to hand over May. Ock makes it seem like he'll do just that, but then drops May. Now, in the time that passes between Ock dropping May and hitting Spider-Man, I'm going to just say hit him over and over again until Ock finally hits him. Hit 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 him!
Hit him on the head!
Ock, who is established earlier in this scene to have no qualms with killing people, just stops what he's doing and stares at Spider-Man so that May can be saved.
When he does that, he's holding the bags of money. Otto is off screen during this time, then eventually we see the bags of money are gone. I imagine Otto dropped them off at the building where there was an open window, then proceeded with the fight, which is a fair precaution to take to avoid losing them to Spider-Man mid-battle. This will lead into the question of where Otto got the money bags from, since that's another point that is raised. So since it's relevant now, I think it's worth addressing here. At the end of of the fight, Otto seems to be at the top of the building, seemingly around the highest floor. Once Peter saves May and swings away, we cut to Otto where he appears to be looking down to grab something, which is likely the bags of money, and instead of him being at the top of the building, he has to climb a couple stories up to be back to where we last saw him. So it appears that he climbed down a bit to reach the bags of money. Now, I do wish this was conveyed more clearly, since in order for me to tell you all of this, I had to do lots of pausing and slowing down, and while it's not that huge of a detail, I think they could have made it a little bit clearer anyway.
Looks like he's had a hold on him for quite a while, and holy shit! Fat Geralt wants to know your location, Spidey. Okay, getting your head yanked straight into a right cross like that will just about guarantee an instantaneous knockout. Look at how Spidey pivoted his entire torso into that move. Pulled punches or not, superhuman strength or not, Ock should absolutely be unconscious at this point.
Again, this is consistent within the Raimiverse since they exaggerate their physics.
Anyway, May is losing her grip on her umbrella, so Spidey starts rushing up the wall, and we get our first moment where Doc Ock is a ninja in this movie.
So there seems to be this misconception that Otto has to cause loud noise every time he climbs a building, but this is not true. I'll elaborate after this clip.
No longer do his tentacles make sound as he climbs a building, which he would probably have to be doing to keep up with Spidey here, or perhaps they can just grow extra long when he needs them to.
Similar to how we can control the force of our feet when walking or running, Otto can control how hard his arms impact a building. You can see this when he's poking his arms through the building instead of just grabbing it, which is more than he needs to do to climb it.
Do not confuse this with that.
Now you might ask why he would deliberately cause noise in this building. I imagine that it would be to provoke them to evacuate, since crowding the street as much as possible makes it harder for the police to get around. And I don't think it's an issue that Otto's arms can grow extra long, since they're capable of expanding in length. While they're not retractable, they are stretchable. Unless the film has set a limit for how long they can stretch, I don't know why we would suggest that they're incapable of growing extra long when needed.
Also, let's just rewind the scene a bit to take note of how far away Spidey and Ock were from May when Spidey got flung across the street. Pretty far down, as you can see. They started just a floor below her, then appeared to fall at least 20 floors by the time Spidey gets flung. Then, when Spidey looks out across the street, suddenly her and Ock are only a couple of floors above him. Just wanted to say that while this seems like a nitpick, it does ultimately allow Spider-Man to reach Ock and May much more easily than if it stayed consistent.
It's worth noting that Otto threw Spider-Man upwards several stories rather than towards the same exact level, and when Spider-Man leaves, he is looking upwards, which means that Otto is much higher than Spider-Man right now. Now, even if I grant that they miscalculated the amount of stories, I don't think that affects much, since Otto would still try to trap Spider-Man, and regardless, he would still have a clear view to swing at.
The only other explanation for this would be if Ock simply climbed back down all 20 floors in the short time it took May to scream and get Spidey's attention, which I also find impossible in its own number of ways.
Otto would have actually had to climb up, since they were falling and the end of the fight was towards the top of the building, so it seems like he misspoke there. Regardless, I don't think that's impossible, since Peter was likely knocked out for a short moment in time, and since this film established that Peter's powers are fluctuating in canon, it would stand to reason that this could briefly daze him before he can fight back immediately.
Ladies and gentlemen, introducing the Haldo maneuver of the entire movie. This fucking thing was here this whole time. I want you to realize that throughout this entire fight scene, in all of the times that Ock had a grip on Spider-Man, or even landed a hit on him with one of his tentacles, that he actually had a blade hidden up at least one of them, and he just decided to not use it until now. My question is why? Why introduce this thing? Why establish that it exists? Why confirm that this entire fight could have ended it before it even started? Why are you using this slow-ass method of killing Spider-Man that's going to give him more opportunities to escape than just sticking this blade through his head or his heart?
Because I think crushing his skull is probably a little more, personal.
For this specific moment, Otto was driven by a level of spite, which would make him more sadistic when killing Spider-Man.
Getting on my nerves.
I have a knack for that.
Not anymore.
The reason Spider-Man is getting on his nerves is because when they first met, he tried to unplug Otto's machine, which distracted him from stabilizing the fusion reactor. Otto's arms are shown and stated to be his method of controlling fusion.
Allowing me to use these arms to control fusion reaction in an environment no human hand could enter.
The goal is to contain the flares within the machine, and if Otto is distracted, his machine becomes more unstable. So if Spider-Man distracts Otto from stabilizing his reactor, and soon after his wife gets killed because the machine spiked again, Otto is going to blame Spider-Man Spider-Man for this, especially since he refuses to blame himself. So when Spider-Man is making jokes while interfering once again, I think the context makes it a reasonable motivation for Otto to draw this out and make his killing more personal and sadistic. This is similarly shown with the Green Goblin. You can argue that it's safer to just kill Spider-Man, but Norman wants to draw it out to bring Peter more pain.
Why don't you use it any of the other times that you have him grabbed and being slammed into walls and windows? Why didn't you hit him with it while he was distracted by saving a falling Aunt May?
So the instances on the building are backed by different contexts. Otto knows that if he doesn't have a hostage, the police will shoot at him. When he loses his hostage and Spider-Man, the cops shoot at him at the end since there's a lower risk of harming civilians. So if Otto were to kill Spider-Man at any point while May is far from him, that would only remove incentive from the cops to rain fire on him. Spider-Man being in the fight is the only thing stopping the cops from shooting at Otto. So with that in mind, it's better to try beating Spider-Man without killing him.
Why do you even have this big-ass blade in your tentacle? What purpose would it serve in your artificial sun experiment? Were you planning on stabbing the sun?
Okay, it's not flawless.
Also, it seems like the police just give up on pursuing him completely as soon as he rounds the corner of the building.
Must have been the wind.
It's very cute that the film thinks cops would do that, but they have these things called cars and helicopters, and they would not have any difficulty with following Ock if they just used them.
So if we look at the shot where they're shooting at Otto, there are not only civilians all over the road, but there are also abandoned cars in front of them, and I can only imagine more of them in the area. And that's ignoring how traffic in New York City is absolute hell. The point is, pursuing Otto from their cars is actually not as simple as it's being described, and their best bet would be to call up a helicopter. But even if they did that, not only would it take time to prepare the helicopter, not only would it take several minutes to even reach the location, but it would also take plenty of time to even track down Otto. In a real case, a cop was attacked by a guy swinging a knife around. It took 4 minutes for the helicopter to get there, and another 45 minutes just to find the suspect. Within those 4 minutes, it's entirely possible that Otto was jumping from building to building to get far away, eventually leading to an alley where he can just use a spare layer of cloth to do the same thing he did to conceal his arms at the bank. If he has one of those, I don't see why he can't have more. It's also possible that he found a nearby subway station, which is par for the course when walking in New York City, then evaded his subway fares and blended in with the crowds. And for those curious, it is absurdly common for people to evade subway fares in New York. If you use the subway on a daily basis, you will likely see fare evasion every day. These are rarely reported, and I've even seen this done in front of subway workers, and nothing happens. Because of how often they fail to enforce this, people casually evade subway fares without fear of consequences, so it wouldn't even stand out to a common rider. Not that I've ever done anything like this.
So the next we see of Doc Ock is him in his lair with several crates worth of parts for his second fusion reactor. For a scene with absolutely no dialogue that exists solely to show that he's working on a second fusion reactor, I have so many questions that are going to be left unanswered for the rest of the movie. Who sold this stuff to him? Where did he get it from? How did he order it?
If Otto believes that he can buy the necessary parts, then it stands to reason that he knows of sellers and manufacturers out there, whether it be in the US or overseas. I don't know how specific we need to get. All we need to know is that Otto is aware of sellers who are willing to accept money.
How did he then have all of this stuff brought to this condemned, half-sunken building without raising any eyebrows?
Otto can pay extra to keep these deals under the table. The idea behind hush money is that it gives someone an incentive to stay silent about a deal. So if he were to reach out to a tech company that regularly distributes these materials and offers them a large sum of money to stay silent about a deal, there are people out there who are willing to accept this, especially shady companies. While Otto doesn't use his money for this, he still makes a deal with Harry under the table to retrieve a resource he needs. So what's stopping Otto from doing this to other people within tech companies, salvaging operations, mining operations, whatever it may be? What's stopping him from reaching out to sellers overseas and offering high amounts of money to conduct these secret deals?
You're all aware that this shit can't just come out of a vacuum, right? There was someone that Doc Ock had to buy all of the stuff from, and then he needed to have it delivered to this abandoned building. Unless we're to believe he carried each container there himself. Ock is the most conspicuous person in all of New York. He no longer has a way of concealing his tentacles.
If Otto can hide his arms with only one of these layers of cloth, why not assume he gave himself more of these to carry around? Wouldn't that make more sense for him to do when constantly moving around the city?
Did the FedEx driver tasked with delivering all these parts just not give a shit about how suspicious this all is? Or did no one seriously notice the robotic tentacle man hauling numerous massive crates across New York City and into these docks?
If we're dealing with a FedEx driver, then Otto could have paid them off to stay silent if he really needed to. If Otto himself transferred transported these crates, I'd assume it was delivered near the docks rather than in the middle of the city.
Cut to Harry Osborn's penthouse, where as he steps out onto his balcony, we hear the impact tremors of Ock's tentacles again, now that the film wants to build up suspense instead of just have Ock surprise the viewer with his sick ninja skills.
Otto is deliberately leading Harry to the side of the building so it's easiest to not only meet him, but also prevent Harry from escaping once he knows what's happening.
Of course, this just begs the question, yet again, as to how Doc Ock got here without drawing any police attention, especially now that we've seen the Daily Bugle state in a headline that the police have expanded the manhunt for him.
He just needs to conceal his arms with his coat and walk over to Harry's penthouse, then start climbing.
Doc Ock knocks Harry to the ground and tells him he needs more tritium, to which Harry responds,
More tritium? Are you crazy? You'll destroy the city!
Keep that in mind, I'm not done with it yet. Ock, of course, doesn't have time to reason with Harry, so he dangles him off the balcony. Of course, Harry, being very inexperienced with being threatened like this, immediately loses his composure and offers a deal to Doc Ock in exchange for not being dropped off the balcony, indicating that he's very easy to intimidate into doing Ock's will.
Hey! Stop! Stop! Alright! Put me down! We'll make a deal!
Now, here's the funniest part about this scene. Harry has no guards here. He does not appear to have a gun on him, nor does he have powers of any kind, as he has yet to discover the Goblin Cave hidden in his penthouse. Ock has complete control over Harry here, given that Harry has no hopes of fighting back against him or even escaping from his reach. Ock could have just refused to make a deal with Harry entirely, instead opting to continue dangling him off the balcony until Harry caves into his demands entirely, which can safely be assumed would happen had Ock just played hardball with him.
I don't buy that. Harry believes the city will get destroyed if he gives up the tritium to Otto, which kills him. So in response to that realization, Otto's threat is that he's going to kill him. Either way, that is the end result, and Harry would know this. So it's reasonable to assume that Harry would say the deal must be honored, or he won't help Otto, because he at least has something to gain from this. Harry doesn't have much to live for outside of his desire for revenge, which is something that he would never let go.
I'm ruined. I have nothing left except Spider-Man.
With how much loyalty Harry has to his father, with how much he hates Spider-Man, I don't think he would ever give up the opportunity to fulfill his revenge. He would see that as a betrayal to his father.
I swear on my father's grave, Spider-Man will pay.
With that said, let's shift focus on what Otto should do. I don't think it's unreasonable for Otto to entertain Harry's deal, since that would make the process easier. If Harry gets something out of this deal, he's more willing to cooperate. If Harry were to give up after being dangled again, then he would have to go to Oscorp to get the tritium, which would have very high security, which means Otto is required to let Harry go the moment he goes for the tritium, which would lead Harry to increase security and get the cops on Otto. He could even set up a sting to get Otto caught, but Harry would have zero reason to do this if Otto delivers Spider-Man to him, which Harry has made clear to be a core desire for him. He wants Spider-Man to pay for what he did to his father. Harry would not call the cops and ruin his own chances of that.
This isn't itself a huge issue, as Otto could have some sort of respect for Harry, given that Harry's company funded his research. But by this point, the film has made it very clear that the tentacles have a very strong influence on him.
Right, but that doesn't mean they'll force him to torture Harry if it's unnecessary. If the deal can help obtain the tritium, and Otto is willing to respect that deal, why would the arms fight back on this? Especially since, like I mentioned earlier, torturing Harry again can backfire, considering what's required for him to even obtain the tritium.
The biggest problem with this plan is the most obvious one. Thanks to this movie adapting the Spider-Man No More arc, Spidey has been absent for some time now, and his tights are hanging up in the office of the Daily Bugle's editor-in-chief. This is public knowledge, as the movie showed issues of the Bugle being printed, with this being the front page story. Whatever exactly has happened to Spider-Man, no one outside of Peter Parker really knows. For all they know, there's a possibility that he's either left New York or has even been killed, but neither Harry nor Ock seem to even entertain that idea. It would be one thing if there was a confirmed Spider-Man sighting earlier in that day, but we know for a fact that there wasn't. Ock is willing to risk his entire plan on the odds of not only Spider-Man still being alive, but also still in New York, and also being easy for Peter Parker to contact strictly on the basis that Peter used to take his photos for a newspaper. While it's a better lead than anything else when it comes to finding Spider-Man, it's still a very weak one. Being the person that takes pictures of Spider-Man does not mean that they would then know who he is or where to find him after he's vanished.
Sure, but I wouldn't call this a weak lead since it goes beyond simply taking photos of Spider-Man. The Daily Bugle was struggling to get photos of Spider-Man, and Peter was able to get exclusive ones.
Problem is, we don't have a decent picture. We barely get a glimpse of him.
The excuse Peter gives is that Spider-Man allows Peter to take photos of him.
I pay you because for some reason that psycho Spider-Man will pose for you. Spider-Man won't let me take any more pictures.
He also tells MJ that he knows and talks to Spider-Man, which would naturally lead to Harry's impression that Peter is friends with Spider-Man, since MJ has no reason to keep that a secret.
I know him a little bit.
Has he mentioned me?
Yeah.
Not to mention your friend the bug.
So I don't think this is a very weak lead, it's rather a strong lead, and as discussed earlier, the importance of Harry's cooperation due to the circumstances of where the tritium is, it'd be in Otto's interest to look into this lead.
Ock also does nothing to make sure that Harry can hold up his end of the deal before going off to hunt down a tough-to-fight superhero who has gone missing.
Giving Harry what he wants is how Otto is ensuring that Harry cooperates, which is the best method that he has because it plays on his greatest desire. While Spider-Man is a challenge for Otto, Spider-Man hasn't actually beaten him in a full-on fight. In fact, much of the time Spider-Man is getting beaten by Otto, and he knows that his powers aren't fully functional since he saw him failing to shoot his webs. I also think Otto's arms never tiring, and Spider-Man still being limited and capable of being tired, gives him the arrogance to believe he will win.
You're slowing down, Arachnid, but my arms never tire.
Which leads us to the next problem with this scene. What was Ock's original plan when he left his hideout and traveled over to Harry's penthouse? The next scene with Harry reveals that he keeps tritium stored away in a safe behind what appears to be a painting of his mother. There's nothing indicating whether it's been there this whole time or if Harry had to retrieve it from some Oscorp facility first, but either answer will break this scene in its own unique way. If it's the former, then ignoring the absurdity of such a rare substance being kept in Harry's home rather than in a secure facility, did Otto know that the tritium was there this whole time? Because if he did, then again, all that Ock has to do is continually dangle Harry off a ledge, or just throw and smack him around until he finally gives up and lets him take it straight from his penthouse. However, if Ock was not aware that the tritium was in his penthouse, then that means he traveled all this way expecting Harry to smuggle it from an Oscorp facility and back to his penthouse without going to anyone for help. Ock would not be able to accompany him on this errand due to the way he would stick out like a sore thumb, so Harry would be able to snitch on Ock to the authorities without Ock being able to do anything about it.
So this kinda just makes my point for me. Because the tritium would be kept at Oscorp, Otto can't follow Harry when he obtains it, which means torturing Harry again wouldn't solve this issue, but giving Harry what he wants the most would, as that would deter him from getting the police involved.
If the tritium is not already at Harry's penthouse, then Ock accepting this deal means he's willing to hinge his plan on Harry being able to take the tritium from one location to another, as well as being willing to hold up his end of the deal after Ock holds up his, which involves supplying Ock with a substance that he outright says will help him destroy New York.
Okay, so what should Otto's plan have been? Because villain plans, to varying degrees, will always come with some form of risk, but if a villain is dedicated enough to their goals, they will accept the risks anyway. So what alternative plan could Otto have gone with to get the tritium?
Do you have a better plan?
No.
We're doing it.
How does Ock know for sure that Harry will fetch the tritium instead of just use Ock to bring Spider-Man to him so he can kill him?
Otto would expect the tritium before allowing Harry to kill Spider-Man. Otto would remain possessive of Spider-Man, or within close proximity to Harry, to ensure that he doesn't kill Spider-Man without the tritium being given to him.
Not to mention, Ock doesn't even need to find the actual Spider-Man. Just steal the Spider-Man costume from the Daily Bugle, knock out a random guy with a build similar to Spider-Man's, put the suit on him, deliver him to Harry, and you have your tritium.
So Otto's plan should be to go to the Daily Bugle, steal the suit that they famously have on display, and travel to Harry's penthouse that same day with a guy built like Spider-Man? This would obviously be manufactured, especially if there's no Spider-Man sighting reported, while a Daily Bugle break-in would be.
Without even asking where he could then find Peter, Ock then leaves the scene without drawing any attention from the police, as he did from the hospital, from the bank, however many times he had to do it when buying and retrieving the parts for his second reactor, and then from the docks to this penthouse. This movie is not done with having him do that either, and each occurrence of it just exponentially multiplies the number of plot holes.
Once again, how do you know he didn't use the same method he used last time?
One would imagine that this means that Ock is somehow on top of the cafe that MJ and Peter are in, which would raise even more questions, but in actuality, given how the bystanders start running away from this direction, it seems that Ock was actually too far down the street diagonally to the right of the cafe to even throw the goddamn thing at them in a straight line. This car is not damaged from a single roll by the time it crashes into the cafe, and Ock isn't even fucking visible when they first look out onto the street. So how he actually did throw this car, I don't fucking know.
Okay, it's not flawless.
We don't have any idea as to how Ock even knows Peter Parker is here. Is he following him? If so, how is he following him undetected?
Same way he concealed himself last time.
Moving on, even though he's a fairly weak one, Peter is still the only lead that Ock has at finding Spider-Man, who he thinks is a separate person from Peter. So as far as he's concerned, Peter doesn't have the capability of dodging a car being thrown at him from behind, or surviving being hit by one. So why the fuck did he risk killing his only lead here?
Okay, it's not flawless.
Ock then proceeds to slam Peter back first into a brick wall. Slamming someone's back into a brick wall at this force could fucking cripple them. Peter Parker can't be of use to you if he can't even fucking move to get in touch with the person you're trying to capture.
Okay, it's not flawless.
And then Ock grabs Mary Jane and escapes with her, presumably to take her to the docks once again without any intervention from the police at any step of the way.
So in this instance, I would expect the police to be called since Otto is actually exposing himself instead of having a private conversation. Like I said earlier, police response times can vary, but average around to 10 minutes, while Otto is capable of jumping from building to building or utilizing the subway or sewers to get around. Either of those options are available to Otto, so I don't see why he couldn't have used them.
And once again, we have Ock tanking hits to the face like they're nothing.
He's moving back every time he gets hit, and Spider-Man pulls his punches.
He is not using his tentacle blade.
Harry wants Spider-Man alive.
And his tentacles are doing these weird little movements where they're just waiting their turn to attack Spider-Man one at a time.
Yeah, the tentacle movements in the shot are a bit lazy, I'll give him that.
There's also this moment where Ock just casually snaps a large metal clock hand in half and takes much less time to do that than it took for his claws to crush Spidey's skull. Okay.
That just speaks to how durable Spider-Man is. Remember, this is the same guy who took a bomb to the face and, just walked it off. This isn't the guy who gets knocked down by a fridge. That's the wrong Spider-Man too.
Spidey then manages to grab Ock with his webs. Good thing his tentacles did nothing to prevent that from happening here, despite being shown as capable of doing exactly that in just a minute.
If anything, that shows Otto is more prepared for that attack. He's learning from his fights.
And then pulls him down with him. Pretty sure you need this guy alive to tell you where MJ is, Spidey, but okay.
This wasn't intentional. Spider-Man was trying to prevent his fall, but ended up webbing onto Otto instead. Spider-Man doesn't have the best view of Otto himself at this angle, so instead of yanking himself upwards, he ended up bringing Otto down, which led him to falling onto Peter.
The two of them then fall right on top of a train, head first, too, if you pay close enough attention. And yeah, Ock's plot armor is once again becoming rather egregious.
In the shot where Otto is on the train, we can see that his arms are consistently protecting him.
Then Doc Ock throws Spidey into the air towards a bridge, which Spidey squeezes himself through, and by the time he goes through the bridge, somehow Ock has already passed him. How fucking fast did that train accelerate as soon as Ock threw Spidey?
Probably fast enough for it to outmatch its speed before Peter was thrown off. I imagine it was already accelerating during the fight. I don't think that's strictly impossible.
Why is Ock facing away from the bridge to do the shocked Pikachu face as Spidey flies towards him?
Because it's insanely impressive that Spider-Man pulled that off, and that caught him off guard.
What was his plan here exactly? Did he not expect Spidey to survive this?
He did, but Spider-Man has super durability, so Otto would know he can survive that.
How does he not get killed or knocked out by Spidey tackling him at this velocity?
In the clip, we can see Otto putting his hands out so he's protecting the more vital parts of his body, and I don't think this is all that much different from when he survives the table being webbed at him.
The next part of this that doesn't make much sense is that Ock manages to sneakily go from the top of the train to the right side, then underneath the train, and then to the left side so he can knock Spidey off the train. Doesn't make a whole lot of sense to me as to how he managed to get himself and his tentacles under the train without making any noise, given how noisy his tentacles are established to be when he's moving around.
Otto can control how loud his arms are. He also doesn't make loud tremors when using them, like here for example. Also, trains are very loud even on the inside, so you could only imagine how loud they'd be on the outside.
Spidey lands behind Ock and just proceeds to do nothing for several seconds as he watches Ock damage the controls of the train. Hit him. 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 Nicely done, Spidey.
Peter doesn't know anything when he gets there. All he saw was Otto's arm reaching into the train car. What if he's holding a passenger hostage? What if he's about to throw him like he did with the others? What if it's safer to stop, assess, then negotiate with Otto to make sure no passengers are harmed? Attacking him immediately when he doesn't even know anything isn't really smart. That's just rushing in without thinking. And once Otto removes the brakes, Peter is caught off guard since the speed suddenly increased, so he has to focus on sticking on the train.
Ock then jumps off the train, knowing that Spidey would rather stay on the train in order to stop it instead of going after him. Of course, when we're just experiencing the scene in the moment, we don't take time to process how contrived it all is. First off, don't trains normally have emergency brakes that act as a failsafe when a failure such as damage to the speed controls occur?
The conductor said that the brakes are gone, so the implication is that Otto sabotaged the brakes too.
I can't stop it! The brakes are gone!
Why is it that Ock ripping out this lever means the brakes are gone?
Because that's how the brakes work in universe.
How did Ock know that the emergency brakes would malfunction?
If the emergency brakes are connected to this panel in the Raimiverse, then Otto probably has the knowledge as to how these subway cars are built.
Of course, this isn't even addressing how far-fetched it is that none of the passengers on the train tried pulling the emergency brakes as soon as Ock and Spidey started fighting on top of it, let alone the conductor not stopping it himself.
Okay, it's not flawless.
I know what everyone's going to say. It's a freaking comic book movie. You can suspend your disbelief for a guy crawling on walls and shooting webs from his wrists, but you can't suspend your disbelief for a train not having functional emergency brakes? Suspension of disbelief is not an all-encompassing justification for anything being possible in a story, even when it has elements that are impossible by design, because even with comic book movies, there is still a limit to these breaks from reality. I know that it seems silly to have no issue with obvious science fiction fantasy elements in a story, but then complaining about something relatively minor such as a train not having emergency brakes. But there is a type of uncanny valley to this sort of thing, where something can be not quite as obviously impossible as superpowers, robotic tentacles with AI, or an artificial sun, while being ridiculous enough to cause one to wince. When we watch an Indiana Jones movie, we accept that mystical artifacts exist in that world and can easily suspend our disbelief as long as the rules built around those artifacts are maintained consistently. That doesn't mean we are then obligated to accept this or this. If the argument that we are obligated to accept it was made 12 years ago, you would have been laughed out of film school. Nowadays, it seems like a prerequisite to graduating from it. Likewise, when we watch a Jurassic Park movie, we accept that in this world, cloning dinosaurs is possible, and we suspend our disbelief for that. But that doesn't mean we're obligated to suspend our disbelief for a human surviving being engulfed in a pyroclastic flow. The same logic applies to a superhero movie showing a passenger train in New York City, where everything is super regulated, not having emergency brakes. I don't buy it, and I don't have to.
Okay, so it's not that the movie is saying emergency brakes don't exist, it's saying that the brakes are gone because Otto sabotaged them. If it works differently than how emergency brakes work in the real world, that's not an argument against its internal consistency.
But hey, it's visually impressive and significantly raises the drama of the scene, so maybe we should give these particular breaks from reality some leeway. Or, you know, we could just accept that neither of the dramatic moments are earned due to being built on external inconsistencies that are uncalled for.
How can an external inconsistency be uncalled for? The goal here is internal consistency, not realism.
Also, not sure how these kids caught Spidey's mask when he took it off while on top of the train, but hey, this impossibility only affects him not being immediately identified by Otto or Harry when delivered to him, and that's hardly consequential to the plot.
I assume Peter would drop the mask somewhere he can reasonably access it again instead of tossing it off the train, which the kids probably saw, and it made them try to save the mask.
Also, I have to say, it's hilarious to think that Ock managed to catch up to where this train was when it was going at 80 miles an hour for 2 entire minutes.
The train eventually would have stopped, so Otto would have eventually caught up. His arms could launch him from building to building and they don't get tired.
While once again avoiding the police, just as he avoids them as he's carrying Spider-Man over to Harry's, which takes him until nighttime to do.
Again, he could have used subway stations or sewers.
Peter reveals that Ock has Mary Jane, which Harry has somehow remained completely oblivious to for the entire day.
Still no word on the whereabouts of your son's fiance. Sorry, John.
Later that night.
Where is she? He's got MJ.
All he wanted was the trivia.
After Harry would have gotten the news of Spider-Man's return, he'd be expecting Doc Ock to show up again. That's not to say MJ's capture wouldn't be reported anywhere, but Spider-Man returning would be the main subject above all else, which would be enough for Harry to immediately fixate on so he can prepare to kill him. Given that this is his obsession, I don't think he'd care about anything else reported by the article or the news broadcast. When we next see Harry, he seems like he's ready, like he's prepared for Spider-Man to return at any moment.
Peter then begs Harry to tell him where Ock is keeping her. The issue is, Harry couldn't possibly know that. Ock never tells him where his new fusion reactor is located, would have no reason to share that information with him, and thus Harry has no leads as to where MJ is located.
Okay, it's not flawless.
He doesn't care enough about Ock destroying the city to alert the authorities of his whereabouts, even though that means he and Mary Jane may die along with everyone else in New York, but he does care enough about Mary Jane's life to tell Peter so that Peter can come to her rescue once he's told that her life is in danger.
He does tell the authorities, that's why they show up at Otto's hideout at the end. Sure, this was after he let Peter go, but he would prioritize his revenge first, which is why he didn't call the police yet.
So, if Ock conducts this experiment, and the only person in town that has tritium is essentially Harry Osborn, and according to the books, they are missing a huge deposit of it around the same night that the second fusion reactor goes off, and the precedent has been set prior in terms of what the experiment does and what it requires to function, then could it not be said that the police would have sniffed their way to Harry and he could go down for not having said anything about all of this on the night that it happened?
Well, he did say something. That's why the authorities showed up at the exact location he gave to Peter.
What we are about to see Ock do here is what I would like to call a total retroactive decapitation of the entire plot revolving around this fusion reactor. Ock's plan, from the beginning, was this.
We could rebuild. Enlarge the containment field. Make it bigger and stronger than ever.
Up to this point in the film, this line could have been interpreted to mean building a larger fusion reactor while using the same amount of tritium as the last time to keep the next sun small enough to be kept in containment and stabilized. When Ock demands to be given more tritium from Harry, there's at least room for interpretation that he simply wants a higher available quantity of it so that he can chip away at it and perform multiple tests, one drop of it at a time. Remember, the entire purpose of this fusion reactor is to provide the entire world with a self-sustaining source of renewable energy for generations. Now, a key component of this reactor is tritium. A small part of it will have enough energy for a long length of time and produce a miniature sun, and it's also established to be an incredibly rare substance.
There's only 25 pounds of it on the whole planet.
However, now we see Ock deciding to use his entire supply of it all at once for this experiment, which not only will reduce the overall longevity of this reactor's function, which is at odds with Ock wanting his life's work to mean something.
Using the tritium all at once doesn't hinder the longevity if the reactor is meant to self-sustain, and since it was working, it would have reached that point if he had the fuel to continue more of it. Keep in mind that the first sun was just a demonstration, not the final product. That's why he was given a drop of tritium rather than a larger supply that can produce more for the city.
But also guarantee a much bigger sun being created, which kind of negates the purpose of enlarging the containment field in the first place. Now, suddenly, this line has taken on new meaning. Ock wasn't talking about making the containment field bigger and stronger than ever, but the sun. Now, why is this a problem? Well, if we are to believe that Otto is a brilliant scientist, it seems a bit out of character for him to not accept the fact that the first sun was unstable and breached containment despite his calculations supposedly being correct. If he's going to proceed to enlarge the containment field by building a bigger reactor, then it would stand to reason that this larger containment field is designed to more efficiently contain a sun of the same size as the first one, which would allow it to be more stable. However, enlarging the sun as well just makes the enlargement of the reactor pointless, as it means that the next attempt at creating fusion will have the same outcome as the first, only this time the sun will be bigger and thus more unstable.
The sun doesn't get big until it starts attracting all of this metal, which Otto can contain by keeping the flares inside the reactor. He saw this as a spike rather than a common occurrence. In both scenes, the sun starts out around the same size, so if the containment field is larger, that means the second sun has more safeguards.
And don't tell me that this is due to Otto's arrogance, because arrogance is not the same thing as stupidity.
Arrogance doesn't equal stupidity, but it can lead to stupid or bad decisions. It's a bad thing that Otto doesn't accept fault for his reactor going wrong, and arguably stupid that he doesn't consider the safety risks a problem, but someone who is too proud to admit to fault will come up with excuses to say that they were right. And the fact that this machine was working to a degree was enough for Otto to convince himself that he was right.
Otto is supposed to be a brilliant scientist, someone who should understand that making a larger reactor isn't going to do anything differently if he then increases the size of the sun as well. Also, if you pay attention to what exact function his tentacles are designed to do, they appear to be there to push whatever flares that come out of the sun back into it. So I'm not entirely sure what his rationale is for making a sun so big that his tentacles wouldn't possibly be able to do that, since he should know what purpose they're supposed to serve.
Like I said earlier, the first sun and the last sun start out at around the same size. More tritium is simply more fuel to sustain the fusion reaction, so that it has a larger energy output.
I'm sure that some will argue that while this plan doesn't make sense to us, it's not really supposed to so long as it makes sense to Otto. The issue with this defense is why would it make sense to Otto? What thought process of his could possibly justify him doing the exact same thing that he did before, only on a larger scale?
Because he believes that the machine was working, which, by sheer technicality, it was. It's just that its instability puts people at harm, but to the arms they still see that as a success because it successfully generated the power that it was meant to generate.
And it gets even worse when you realize that this isn't just out of character for Otto, but also for his artificially intelligent tentacles, which are characters in and of themselves.
These 4 actuators were developed and programmed for the sole purpose of creating successful fusion.
The key word here is successful fusion. Sucking in everything is not a mark of successful fusion.
It's not successful to us because we care about public safety, The arms don't care, hence why they still see the experiment as a success, because objectively speaking, the machine was working. The fusion was successful, the energy output was successful, so under the influence of the arms, the risk is worthwhile for the result.
Well, that's a risk we're willing to take.
It is really strange that these robotic tentacles that all have a mind of their own are now prompting Otto to just repeat the same unsuccessful results except on a larger scale. Unless the idea is that they think that the sun sucking everything in actually is a mark of success and they have somehow convinced Ock of that. But I don't know of anyone who would be willing to take that position.
Well, that's halfway there. The metal being sucked in isn't necessarily seen as the core element to success, but rather it's seen as a spike that doesn't harm the success of the fusion.
Much of the arguments for Ock's character rely on him believing that he's going to save the world with a self-sustaining source of renewable energy that will power up the entire planet. So switching over to him believing that what he's doing will actually lead to the sun sucking everything in would kind of contradict that.
His driving motivation isn't that he's saving the world, it's that he's fulfilling his dream and proving that he wasn't wrong. He's ultimately doing this for himself. It may have been more altruistic beforehand, but after he gets influenced by the arms, I think it's pretty clear that Otto is finishing the project for himself. One might call this unchecked selfishness.
Not to mention his redemption coming up in this scene relies on him not wanting the world to be destroyed by his creation in order to make sense.
Yes, but this is after the arm's influence is being hindered by the fact that they're getting weaker in the water and from the electric shock, which makes it easier for Peter to reason with Otto.
Ock ignores several other prime opportunities to use his tentacle blade on Spider-Man. Then when he finally pulls it out for the second and last time he ever does in this movie, he takes a page out of the Bond villain's handbook and takes a sweet-ass time to actually try to stab Spidey with it.
Yeah, but the film has already established that Otto is spiteful towards Spider-Man, and given the fact that he believes Spider-Man is cornered and knows what MJ is planning, he wanted to rub it in his face that the trick that worked last time won't work this time.
Let's see you scurry out of this.
It's a reflection of Otto's pride and spite towards Spider-Man. And like I said earlier, Spider-Man hasn't straight up won a fight against Doc Ock. He only wins the final fight. Otto didn't get caught in the first fight, and Otto tired out Spider-Man in the train fight. Like I said earlier, a huge element of his hubris comes from the fact that his arms don't get tired and Spider-Man does. Even if Spider-Man knocked him out, the arms would still finish the job.
The abandoned building takes a sweet time to collapse in on itself so that Peter can talk sense into Otto.
It's a machine that constantly fluctuates in terms of how it spikes and pulls in metal. This was shown earlier in the movie, where the reactor didn't pull in metal at a constant rate. It's constantly spiking around. By now, Southpaw is done talking about the plot and moves on to talking about Peter Parker's character arc. Now, as I recall, he disagrees with himself the most on this section, but I figured it'd be an interesting discussion anyway.
Although I'm a little confused about how the film really emphasized Peter's desperate financial situation early on, but then drops that completely after he retired from being Spider-Man. We saw him lose his pizza delivery job at the beginning of the movie, and he would have certainly lost his job at the Daily Bugle once he no longer had pictures of Spider-Man for Jameson to buy from him. But there seems to be no mention of how much worse his financial hardships would be without his photography gig.
Well, Peter has taken photos of other events outside of Spider-Man. The planetarium event likely helped boost him, and since other events in the city can be captured, it's not like Peter has no means whatsoever of making money. Though I do think this would be neat to include in the montage that they have in the movie.
I found the scene where Peter just walks away from a guy getting assaulted by two muggers simply because he lacks his powers to be grossly out of character for him. I get what the scene is trying to convey. I get that we're supposed to question Peter's actions here, but it really seems to go overboard in how it juxtaposes with him running into a burning building to save a small child later on. In all honesty, by this point it seems like he'd be the kind of person to try to at least help the mugging victim, even if it meant getting his ass kicked in the process. A small fix for this could have been if the muggers weren't just using their bare fists, but were instead holding the guy at knife point or gun point, in which case Peter would stand at risk of not just receiving an ass kicking, but actually losing his life as a result of helping, which would have been just as efficient, if not more.
So he highlights that the scene would be fixed if the muggers were holding the guy at knife point or gun point, but if I see muggers on the street beating on someone, I'd assume they'd likely have knives or guns on them in case someone tries to stop them. So even though we don't see it in the scene, it's reasonable for Peter to assume this is likely as a standard precaution, and given that Peter's idea of responsibility is built around the power you have, it would make him less compelled to take action against those muggers since he doesn't have the power to fight crime. An interesting defense that I've actually heard from Southpaw himself more recently is that Peter is experiencing the bystander effect. It's summarized by the idea that people are less likely to help out a victim when surrounded by other people. It results in people relying on others to take action rather than accepting the responsibility themselves. Peter can't afford a cell phone to reach out to the police, but since others do, he'd leave it in their hands to get their attention. I think Peter's shift towards helping out in the burning building is backed by a few elements in the story. For one, Peter feels increasingly guilty about the people he is failing by not being Spider-Man, and when he sees that crime has increased by 75%, it would only force him to realize that his actions had major, irreversible consequences, and while the mugging would result in a targeted attack against Peter if he were to intervene, a fire is more of an environmental issue, rather than something that would stop him dead in his tracks immediately. On top of this, a mugging typically aims to get money out of someone, whereas a fire would actually kill someone. So in this case, there's the aspect of it being irreversible, and hearing that someone's kid is stuck in the building is enough of a push for him to start taking action, rather than standing around and doing nothing again. What's more telling is how Peter feels broken after hearing that one person in the building didn't make it out. Even after he went home to get some sleep, he woke up still thinking about that one person he failed, so I think the progression for his arc is clear enough and supported by cause and effect. This is where I'm going to stop responding because there are no more points for me to respond to. Interestingly, there's still a good 17 minutes left of the video that I'm not covering, but that portion does make interesting points about what works about the film, and how the emotional responses to it are a testament to the skillful craft amongst the creators. But I'm not here to replay his commentary without comment, so you can watch the rest of the video for yourself if you're interested. With that said, it's always refreshing when I'm responding to a review that is, you know, actually talking about the writing, especially in detail, rather than screeching about black people, and women, and wokeness, and whatever. While Southpaw definitely needs to work on his upload schedule, Southpaw makes some good content out there that I'd recommend. If you enjoyed my responses to EFAP, you'll likely enjoy his response to EFAP's awful criticism of terriers. I also think he has a good review of Daredevil Born Again, at least the first 3 episodes that he covered. Check that out if interested as well. Feel free to come on Disagreement Day if there are any disagreements about this film or anything else I've talked about, and let me know your thoughts on the film in the comments, and what I should respond to or review next. That's all I have for now. Goodbye.
See ya.